Yeah, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. And you have seen today I want to speak about platform economy, which is to some extent a hot topic these days. And sometimes we are confusing people. And I'm concerned that I will do the same in my speech because people use platform in different contexts. I will do this as well, so therefore I want to clarify at the very beginning in which context we are using platforms. In one case, sometimes you hear us speaking about platform industry 4.0 or national platform industry 4.0. This is just an organizational setup. I would say a modern, innovative setup to reach a certain goal, normally an industrial goal or a national one, might be to secure the competitiveness of our manufacturing industry, like in our platform industry 4.0. There are other setups like that. In Germany recently, we were setting up a national platform for mobility, and there it's about reaching the global goal of CO2 reduction in the mobility sector. So that is one piece, and I will refer to it, so just to make sense. What is more important I will speak about today is if it's driven by technology. And there are normally two ways to do it. One could be via hardware, which you know, through famous Sony PlayStation or the Microsoft Xbox. But I think more important in the future if it's driven via software. Sometimes we call it the software-defined platforms, but I think the better term would be digital technology platform. That's what I'm speaking about. That's the base behind platform economy. And why are people so interested in it? And the reason is pretty obvious. It's about digital platform have the promise of self-reinforcing growth. That's, so to say, the holy grail of business. Every business wants self-reinforcing growth. And it's via the well-known network effects, because in some cases, like in social networks, the more users you have, the more users you get. It's well known from telecommunication infrastructures. And on the other side, if we go to the more modern and more important multi-sided markets, then like we know it from, let's say, smartphones, if you have more apps, you get more users, and if you have more users, you get more app developers. That's well known. You see from that it's important in this case that you don't have not only the platform as a technology enabler, but you need an ecosystem of complementary providers of products, services, and innovation in order to bring a complete offering to the market. And on the other side, it's a good opportunity for small companies and startups because digital platforms give them the opportunity immediately, let's say, to build up a business with global reach. Finally, because of the progress we have seen in cloud computing, it's very cheap these days to get the infrastructure. Infrastructure as a service is cheap. And there's competition out there. And even startups, some of them I know in Berlin, have started to take this opportunity of cheap infrastructure as a service to build their own platforms and provide these as platform as a service to the global market. So building platforms, if they have the right ideas, is not only something for the big elephants, as we will see later on. It is an opportunity for small companies as well. So having said this, you see that platform enterprises will be more powerful than traditional ones. And that's the reason why every business leader should be scared if a platform enters his market. He should think about if he can compete with them or if he joins them. Both is an option. Now, the question how many sites you have is different. It's a strategic decision. And you know this. On the left-hand side, you see Apple. Apple decided to develop the hardware themselves. So it's a two-sided platform with app developers and users, which is very successful, in particular in terms of profit. And on the other side, if you look to Google's Android, it's a three-sided market because they decided it might be better to open up on the hardware side and have a third, let's say, side for different hardware manufacturers, giving them more market share in a quick way. But on the other side, it's a question of strategy. It's a question of integration advantages versus openness. So that's the question. But it both are very successful. Now, we are speaking about digitization, and we all know here that this is there for more than 50 years. And when we speak about a digital transformation, we speak about a second wave, as you know, a wave that was kicked off, I would say, 5 to 10 years ago. But also some of the concepts in the first wave have now a renaissance in the second one. And the very famous are platforms. 20 years ago, and this is an original slide from a book published in 2000, we called them electronic marketplaces. And you find many examples there, but you don't find these companies any longer because most of them gave up and are not there any longer. A few got required, but there are a few that survived, and one is very famous, Amazon. And at that time, the only thing people wanted to show is that Amazon was bringing benefits to both sides, to the consumer, with very consumer-focused completeness of service, a very tight integration between their selling process and the consumer buying process. And on the other side, they had a very, very good integration between the delivery of the different publishers and their sourcing, offering them having no books on the shelf, say books are sold immediately when delivered, and offering them much more market insight than they had individually. So that was a good starting point. Where are they now? You can see it here. And what you can see is a proof that whenever, as I said, a platform enters the market, it wins. But it tells you something different. It tells you that exponential growth is possible and platforms are driving exponential growth. And it tells you a third thing. If you look to the time, 2000, how small it was. If you look back to my first picture. And that's the key point. People don't understand exponential growth. It takes for a long time and nothing is happening. So people go out of business and say, okay, that's not worth to spend more money. But once it's catching up, then it's very often too late for others to enter the market. And you can see it here. So, having said this picture I think people know. It tells us that there is something happening in a market. The market, the financial market, understands the value of these companies, and you see here how big the value is. And it's centered in 2 countries. It's in the US because they started early and they have this environment of Silicon Valley. And it's in China because it's a protected large consumer market with a lot of data. So it's 2 approaches to it. What's left is the rest. Whereas Europe, there's just a small one, SAP, okay, nice, but very small, and Japan isn't there. And the one in Africa is just there because they have a stake in Tencent, so can just ignore it. So that's happening. Where are they? Mostly in business to consumer. Okay, so you can say that's gone, but there's an opportunity. Business to business, it's still open. The market is open, and I think it should be an opportunity for countries like Japan and Germany, which are strong in manufacturing and other areas, in order to take the challenge and might be champions in the B2B platform business. This is my favorite slide because once you want to enter the platform economy, you always have to answer the question, what is the business model of the digital economy? We have asked this question also 20, 25 years ago. And the answer was a different one at that time, because there was a lot of progress in the meantime in the environment, in sensor technology, robotics, cloud computing, hardware, artificial intelligence. That is the base for this second wave. And therefore, under the umbrella of Industry 4.0, we have made this value proposition, which is a very ambitious one, and we want to deliver individualized product service bundles on demand as a service with a superior experience. It's nearly everything you can promise. So very ambitious. But it's possible these days. And it's possible because now we have the data you need in order really to fulfill this promise. We didn't have the data. But now, because of sensor technology and other progress, we can collect real-world data, massive real-world data, big data, nearly for free. That's the starting point. But this is just, as I say, big data. It starts becoming important if you can convert it into insight, into business and market insight, which we call smart data. And there you need other technologies, analytics, artificial intelligence, and so on. And that's the reason why data is now this independent resource of the digital economy. It has a value. People understand the value and try to protect their data. What they haven't understood is that the value creation happens if you share data. So we have this conflict that to the one hand side, people feel they have the value resource here, but on the other side, they are not open enough to share the data to create even more value. And this sharing is partially done on digital platforms. Digital platforms are two things. They can, let's say, more or less bring data from different sources together and create more value. And on the other side is a kind of, I would say, a virtual factory which converts big data into smart data. So for me, digital platforms are the factories of the future. And it's not about a supplier network any longer, it's about an ecosystem. And we call it an ecosystem to make clear that there is a difference. Because in order to manage in a successful ecosystem, it's about win-win situation. I come back to it later. If you really want to create a good one, you have to take care that all members of the ecosystems win at the end of the day. And last but not least, it's about people, it's about talent, it's about lifelong learning, it's about qualification, and it's about qualification on the job because the innovation is going so fast. And based on this new value proposition and the new value creation architecture, now it's possible to offer all of that, what is there for 20 years, that we are, let's say, monetizing about output-based, value-based, whatever you like. Because now, I would say, the provider has taken so much risk away from the consumer, but he has also so much data that he can afford to take all this risk to go to this new profit formula. We believe, as I said in the headline, that the business model from that point of view is based on smart services. And therefore, let me just shortly explain how smart services are created, and now you see that we come back to digital technology platforms, and therefore the base for the platform economy. At the end, you see all products being digitally enhanced, connected to the internet or to a platform, to an industrial IoT platform. That's where the raw data come in, as I said. Then you have the platform, more or less as a tool set for the technologies you need. And you have different ways to distribute your services to the market. Traditional way via app stores, could be a more modern way via chat bots. Could be that we have separate business-oriented service platforms where it's not so much about technology, it's much more about the processes, the rules, I would say, ERP-type system you need in order to manage economically such an ecosystem. That can be separated, must not be, but can be. And finally, let's say a close link to the client to have this known fast feedback loop in order to foster innovation and to improve products and services much faster than before. If you look to the right-hand side, then you see here, it's about data-centric business models. It's about a data-driven platform economy. And most important, it's cross-industries. So to some extent, it's exactly what you in Japan are saying if you say it's about connected industries. That's what's needed. Yeah, and if you speak about smart, I think artificial intelligence plays an important role. I've taken this because last year we have handed over our recommendations for autonomous systems and for robotics and artificial intelligence to our chancellor. Japan was at that time our partner country, so your prime minister was there. And just to make a few remarks, we need it on all levels. We need it down there in order to ensure the quality of data. We need it within the platform, definitely. We needed to create these, I think, different conversational styles, how to interact with users, speech recognition, etc. And last but not least, you have to model the different users, their behavior, in order to match exactly to their needs. So in all levels, more or less, artificial intelligence plays an important role. And autonomous systems are necessary because it's obvious that we will not achieve these goals of individualized product and services if we do the reconfiguration, the reprogramming that we need on a very frequent way manually with people. It's just too expensive and takes too much time. So all these things have to be done automatically, but automatically in a way of autonomous, self-learning, self-adjusting, agile systems, therefore autonomous systems. Now, I always take the slide to explain, let's say, how we in Germany address these topics with 3 different projects, and but coming close to what in Japan is now Society 5.0. We have started very early, 2011, because we felt that, I think from the experience of the economic crisis, that we are just not prepared if a crisis like that of 2008 or 9 is happening to adjust our infrastructure and our businesses quick enough in order to absorb those shocks. Therefore, this huge downturn nearly in all countries. And we just felt we should learn our lesson and create an environment which helps us in the future just to absorb those shocks as best as possible. And I think we are quite there, because in a nutshell, it was in Industry 4.0 mostly about agility, adaptability, etc. So here it was about rethinking our production, our workplaces. Next, very obvious, as I said earlier, you have to understand, if you want to be successful, the business model of the digital transformation. So it was our second question. And so we came up with this idea of smart services, as I have explained, everything as a service, data-driven and platform-based. And it means now it's about companies not just rethinking their production environment, it's about rethinking their entire business and thinking, are they a platform provider and have they to create their own ecosystem, or are they too small or whatever, and will they join different platforms and play in different ecosystems? That's a strategic decision. And finally, because, as I said, we need autonomy, because it's about individualized products and services, we need autonomous systems not just at work, not just in Industry 4.0, but in the meantime, I think in the mobility, we all speak about autonomous driving. And if you look at home, we all speak about smart home. So we have different types of artificial intelligence-based product, services, appliances there. And it means that normal people, citizens, experience these different systems on a daily basis. Might be if they wake up at home, if they go to work with an autonomous car, and then might be collaborate with a robot at work. And that is important because it means that we have not only to think about technology, it's now about how much decision power do we give to these machines, to these robots, to these autonomous systems, what are the legal implications, what are the social implications, and what are the ethical ones. Yes, all these systems can learn. They all can learn from data. They all can find their pattern. But the question is, do they find the right ethical frameworks that we are used to have in our society? And most people believe not. So that means we have to give them this ethical framework, and that is different from context and from culture. So therefore, it's a broader perspective. Now, as I said, now I confuse you because when this transformation requires a broad foundation, I think you need organizations in order to push this forward. We call them organization platform as well. We have two in Germany. One, you know, Platform Industry 4.0, where we have a separate working group, in particular on these topics of digital business models, on platform economy, others as well, which focus on, for example, security, working closely with our Japanese colleagues, work on education, etc. And we have one for autonomous systems, which is broader now, our national platform for artificial intelligence. This group has done a great job because the first thing they did is looking at least to our home market and saying, okay, there are so many platforms there, what are they doing? In the meantime, they have scanned more than 100. They are not through, it's not all of them. I have only picked a few examples here. And you can distinguish. Are they closed or are they open? That's a business question, I would say. It's about, it's about economy, it's about the business model. And then it's a technology question. Are they closed, one-sided, or are they multi-sided? It's an architectural question. And you see here that only, I would say only 25% of our platforms are in the nice spot at the end, which is both open, multi-sided, and therefore these are candidates for the growth I have shown earlier, because they can, through networks effect, let's say, come to exponential growth. That's good. What about the others? It's bad for those who are, let's say, closed and one-sided, because this is a more or less traditional business. That's linear growth, and they should make up their mind. The other ones, they have still the opportunity to open up or to go to multi-sided if the architecture allows. So we will see. But I just give you a feeling, lots of platforms out in the market, different approaches, and if you go on a global scale and you just look to the huge number of industrial IoT platforms that are there, this is really confusing the consumer. So what will happen is we will see a kind of consolidation there. And the question is, in platform economy, you know there's a tendency for concentration, for monopolies. The winner takes it all. That is a slogan we know. And the question is, do we want this? Do we want the winner takes it all? I don't think so. And that's the reason, we come to it later, why I'm so much a promoter of platform interoperability. That we are not coming at the end to the model of the winner takes it all. So, that is one piece. And the other one is, what about ecosystems? And therefore, you see here some of the definitions. It's more or less, let's say, the idea that no one can do it alone and that the sum of the participants create more value. There will be relationships, they depend on each other. And, which is very important, which is for me part of an ecosystem, it's not controlled by one actor only. That's a big difference to traditional business, where you have the big, let's say, OEM and the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 supplier behind. That's not the case if it's an ecosystem, otherwise something else. The benefits are obvious. It's the scaling, it's the higher efficiency, it's lower risk, and in particular the co-innovation between the partners. That's the ecosystem. Now, if we go in both directions, ecosystem and technology platforms, as a key components of a platform economy, and the question is, okay, what are the critical requirements and why do they require international cooperation? And I would like to go to 6 of them. I think these are the most important ones, with a few examples. And then at the end might be make a proposal where we should continue and deepen our relationships. I will start with platform governance, then go to security, which is obviously a key topic. Another key topic I mentioned already is a question of data sovereignty. So can I protect my data and still share them? We have lots of questions about liability, legal, what does this mean? Legal contracts between machines. Standards, we are pretty well underway, but interoperability, so far from my point of view, not so much. And then finally, regulation. I've put regulation at the end because I always believe we first should experiment and then regulate and not first regulate. So therefore, I will just make a few examples and go through. So let's start with governance. Coming back, what I said, there is a tendency towards concentration, which is good for the platform provider, which is not what the user wants. So find something in between. The same is with lock-in effects. I think I was too long in the software industry. I like the lock-in effects. That's not the point. The point is at the end what the consumer wants. And I think they don't want lock-in effects, which can be, let's say, stopped through interoperability. That's one piece. But also portability. And portability means at least that you can easily extract and import data and content from one platform and bring it to another one, which isn't that easy today, not for all platforms. Neutrality is another topic people are discussing. And this is a trade-off. Most of the platforms you see today depend on the deep domain expertise of the platform provider. It's good to know if a manufacturing platform is built by somebody who understands how to do manufacturing. It's good if a mobility platform is built from somebody who knows the business. You feel, okay, they built a platform according to the need of the market. On the other side, there is a concern, okay, will the platform provider enter my business? Will he be a competitor? Is he, let's say, in the same area where I'm doing business? Is the neutrality there? So that's the trade-off you have. Neutrality would be there if it's just the technology provider who is giving the platform. But here on the other side, don't have the domain expertise. That's a trade-off. And we have different approaches. You will see it later in an example, but that's a trade-off. And finally, it's about trustworthiness. Trustworthiness in the ecosystem, because if it's a dynamic one, so that means that it's not a rigid one which you define and keep for 2 or 3 years, but on a fly you add new partners, let's say new complementary service providers, it's a question, can you trust them, that they deliver quality, etc. So we have to find a way to define this trustworthiness of business partners more or less, let's say within a day or so. That's another point. So these are some topics for governance. The other one is security, and I have taken this picture. This is part, by the way, of the work of Industry 4.0 platform, this one, where people, first of all, made clear what is the difference between Industry 3.0 and 4.0. And let's make a click. So that would be the presentation if I present Industry 3.0. Because even in 3.0, we exchange data between companies. Even 10, 15 years ago we did this, that's not new. But what have we exchanged? Real-time data, not. Master data might be. All of them? Some of them. On which level? Between departments. Amongst which companies? Mostly very close partners. That's what we did. What's happening now if we come to 4.0? Oops, that looks pretty complex. And it is. And with complexity, I think the risk of attacks increases. So keeping security there is much more difficult. And it's both inside an enterprise, because now out of a day, we speak about concepts like digital twins, so more or less, I would say, a virtual representation of each physical component, equipment, etc. And a digital twin must not sit on the component, on the asset, could sit on a cloud. So it's first the communication between physical asset and digital twin. It's communications between components of a product and products. It's machine-to-machine real-time interaction just in the enterprise. And it's not stopping at the boundaries of an enterprise. The same thing is happening between enterprises. Otherwise, the ecosystem is not working and working in real time. So we exchange data in real time between machines across enterprises. So that tells you the complexity you have, and it tells you that we have to do a lot in order to ensure that cyber and IT security is really preserved, because that's where most companies still have concerns. The other point is data sovereignty, and that was a topic which was discussed at least in Germany a few years ago, and mostly from our small and mid-sized companies, because exactly so they felt that they have to protect the IP they have. They have not much IP. The IP is intellectual property, their knowledge they have. It's small but very valuable, because that makes them, might be a hidden champion. Therefore, giving their data gives them the concern, they show their secrets, their business secrets, and they don't want this. So the question was, can we find a way, technology, that helps them to ensure you can keep your data secret, but still we can exchange the data that is needed within an ecosystem in order to create this additional value I spoke about. So keeping data, but still sharing them in a digital economy, so that there is a network of trusted data exchange, a trustworthy data supply chain across enterprises and across industries. Supporting definitely architectural plurality, because some companies have data lakes and others might have already started going for blockchain as a solution. So it must be an open solution. And hopefully addresses these concerns of IP protection, loss of control. And on the other side, you see since a few years a lot of hype about blockchain. Why? Because of the same reason. People believe, yes, might be there are cases where I can trust my partners. I know them for years, trusted business partners. But what about these ecosystems? Can I trust all of them? If I can, I always feel a central solution is the best one. Then we don't need those things. You can take blockchain, but you can keep them centrally as a trustworthy partner. But if you don't find them, yes, then we have blockchain. You just distribute to all of them the data. Then you have a single source of truth through redundancy of data, and that's what blockchain more or less is. It's a little bit more, but that's what it is. And it's fine. So it's a decentralized architecture, and it has some additional concepts in it, so-called smart contracts, which people believe, pieces of software, which you can implement on a machine level, and could be the source, the rules implemented to have machine-to-machine collaboration, let's say, on a defined way. So therefore, different approaches. Normally, I would say good platforms provide all of them so that the customer has a choice. That is the value of a good technology platform, to just give you choices and, let's say, give you the newest level of technological innovation. Legal liability, just 2 comments. The first point is the most important one. Legal regulation are today amongst people, period. And now it's about amongst people and machines, or machine and machine. So we have to find ways to define that. And there are areas where this is defined already. If you look to the financial services industry, where you have these trading in milliseconds, billions of dollars, then already today software is making decisions. And it can happen that sometimes they make a wrong decision and move a few billions wrongly. They found a way in saying, okay, in that case, we just reverse this deal. I don't know if that will happen also in manufacturing, but I want just to say we have to find ways, and there are examples from which we can learn. And the technology underneath I have explained, that could be smart contracts, could be blockchain, could be also the industrial data space. So work has to be done, but it should not be too difficult. And I want to make an example, because we have discussed this last year in Germany, and it shows you a little bit that what I just said, you will not find a generic solution. I think it will be an application-oriented one. It depends on the individual application. And therefore, I wanted to bring this example of autonomous connected driving, because that is very obvious, because everybody of you have a car, and it's pretty easy to understand. Today, it's very simple. The liability is as you as a car owner, and the second one is as a car producer, the normal product liability. That's easy, we know this. Now, out of a sudden, in the connected industry, there are more players coming into play. For example, those who are delivering the communication network, and others. If you want to have a traffic control system, you can say there might be also a public government institution that is in it. So therefore, you have to make an architecture first and then ask the questions, who is liable and why? In our case, this was pretty easy. At the end of the day, there will be platforms where all the data from the fleet of autonomous cars, might be of a certain provider, will be collected. And it will be collected because you need them to retrain later on the cars, let's say to retrain the neural brain you implement into the cars. And these are partially data which are important, let's say, for autonomous driving, and it's a mix of privacy data from the driver. So in order to secure, let's say, or to protect security or make protection as good as possible, a central solution seems to be the best one, the easiest one. And then from there, you can open up and can say, okay, which areas need part of these data, whom I do have to share, traffic control system and others. Now, the question for liability is pretty simple. And then it's a question, okay, if something happened and an autonomous car makes an accident and kills people, the liability is where the one who's managing this backend, nobody else. And that's accepted in the industry. And therefore, I think the question who will have this backend is pretty obvious, in most cases, the OEM. But on the price of the complete liability. And then you can start answering new questions, because the next question is acceptance of the public. And the acceptance of the public will be there if you can promise a much higher level of safetiness, that you save people. And the question is, how much higher must this be that you can convince people? It's not answered so far. And. You can answer the question, are learning systems enough, or do you need self-learning systems? Learning systems have the advantage that you train them and you have a test because you implement them into a car. And then you stop. So all cars are identical. Self-learning has the advantage that they can adjust to the behavior of the driver, which might be a little bit better. But it means that the brain of every autonomous car is different. So again, a trade-off. But you see, this is something that has to be discussed domain-specific, individually, case by case. Standards interoperability. This is the one we are promoting now for years from Industry 4.0. That's a key question. We need standards in order to convert physical assets into digital twins. Make it simple. These are the asset administration shells, because once we have standards here, then we can, let's say, exchange digital twins across companies, across industries, across countries. Therefore, we need to agree on certain things like unique IDs. Instructing according to different views, might be a view of marketing or a view of design. We need to agree on certain mandatory fields, and we need flexibility for free manufacturer-specific properties. We have to agree that this is a repository of the services these product is delivering, and this is based on a service-oriented architecture. This is in a nutshell there. So here I think we are well underway. Where we are less well underway is this picture. I think if you see today what platforms should deliver, then you see already the trade-off. To the left-hand side, that's okay. Connected products, most companies are there. The next one is a little bit more difficult, because if you're a manufacturer and you get, let's say, machinery, production machinery from different vendors. You need a platform which is able or capable to integrate all of them. And the question is, do you want, I think, a hole in your firewall from each of them or only one? Now it becomes more difficult. Orchestrating partners is also okay, but once you enter the last one where you say we have connected business networks from different industries, then it's obvious that this will be presented by different platforms, domain-specific one, and here is absolutely mandatory that we get platform interoperability. And we have to work on it. We haven't done it so far. I will skip this because of time and come to this one. The one before was an example that this is, by the way, possible. It's an example that you say, if really electric cars will be important, then you as a consumer want to charge everywhere. You don't want contracts or whatever. Whenever there's a charging station, you want to go there and you want to charge with a standard plug and with standard conditions, and everything should be under the umbrella, the commercial terms. That's called roaming in telecommunication. Here we want to do the same. And you can achieve this with one central platform. There was, by the way, first from the European Commission an idea to do this for course of Europe, which is not a good idea. Why? Because it's not very efficient. Cost is high, there's no competition. So therefore much better is allow competition, allow different platforms in the market, but still make interconnectivity workable so that you as a consumer feel it looks like one platform. So that's the idea behind. Regulation, my more or less last point is, there are lots of questions. It starts with what should the regulator do if it's about too much market power through data, if they abuse their market power. What happens, that's far in the future, if machines make decisions and they're smart enough to find out that, I think, like in the antitrust-related decisions, if they, let's say, come to joint decisions, which is not allowed, they might be better off. Okay. Question is, how much cooperation is allowed in these new organizational platforms? We are very careful here that this is all pre-competitive, but it's a question that has to be answered. And finally, we have to educate our governments that they should not regulate based on the experience of B2C, business-to-consumer platforms. Business to business is different. It should mainly be driven by business and regulated very smoothly. So, we have a good cooperation these days, an international one with different countries, a very strong one with Japan, between the Robot Revolution Initiative and Platform Industry 4.0, as you see here, on different important topics: cybersecurity, standardization, international regulation, so it's all fine. But I think a few pieces are missing. Therefore, if I look back as my final slide, which I brought up at the beginning, what are really the requirements to bring up a platform economy, then you see here with green that we are already working on some of the key topics. Some are left out, and I personally feel the most important ones in the near future is that we work closely on this topic of data sovereignty and platform interoperability. I think that is, from my point of view, the two important pieces, because data is a base for the business model of the digital economy, and platforms are there in order to get the value out of the data. So the data is key. And the next one is coming back. Do we want, at the end, a model where the winner takes it all? Or do we want a model where everybody wins? And that, for me, is interoperability of platforms. So I hope we can extend our collaboration. We'll work on this tomorrow. Thanks for listening, and have a nice day. Thank you.